And here we are. Welcome to the Book Notes Show with Mary Knippel, the book mentor. And our guest today is Lisa Adams, and we're going to talk about TEDx. And before we get started, I'd like to read a little bit about who Maija-Liisa is. She is the founder and CEO of Maija-Liisa Speaks, an Idaho-based TEDx Talk coaching firm. Over the 6 years, Adams has helped more than 100 clients understand how to land, nail, and use their TEDx talk to grow their impact and increase their income. As a keynote speaker, she has addressed hundreds of individuals, including the International Women's Day Conference and BYU, Idaho, where she serves as an adjunct professor in public speaking and professional presentations. Before she before starting her business, Adams was a regional sales manager for a $1.4 billion global software company. Adams is also an esteemed member of the Christopher Kai's GPS Global Speaker Community, where its members include number one best-selling international authors, thought leaders, world-renowned athletes, and seasoned executives who reside in 120 countries, 30 120 cities, 30 countries, and 6 continents. So, welcome to the show. I'm
Well,
so
thanks.
excited to be speaking with you today. And first of all, I'm always curious to find out how you got to be this TEDx expert. What was your path?
Well, thanks, Mary, for having me on your show today. It's been a delight getting to know you, and I'm glad to be here with your community today to talk about TEDx. I fell into TEDx quite naturally. Was when I was teaching at the a student came to me and said, "Have you heard the talk about the golden circles?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't." And anyway, this is Simon Sinek's talk about starting with why. And so that's the first time that I learned about TED Talks, which is quite ironic because back in the day that it was always these TED Talks were always held in California, and I was living there at the time. And I hadn't heard about them. So it was later when I heard about them. Like many of us, we didn't hear about them until they're put onto YouTube. Then how I ended up doing something with it as far as becoming a TEDx expert is teaching public speaking and professional presentations at the university. I attended the first TEDx and TEDx Idaho Falls events that are local here. And when they found out that I teach that, they said, some of our speakers could have used some help. Would you mind helping our speakers? And so I have done that for years with these events. But then also I've had people come to me privately and say, would you help me find a stage? So I teach part-time at the university, but I also spend the other part of my time, which is most of the time it seems like, helping people find a stage or with their talk or some aspect of their TEDx experience.
Oh, so it was a natural progression
Very
that
organic.
you were there at the right place at the right time and you
Yes.
said yes. So tell us, what are some of the secrets that, well, anyone who they think they have a great idea for a TEDx stage and they know they could be a good presenter, and they apply and it goes nowhere.
Yes, many are rejected. Actually, over 90% are rejected just by sheer numbers to start with. So when I started back in 2014, there were about 300 TEDx stages. Today, there are over 3,200 TEDx stages.
Wow.
So although you have more stages, anywhere you apply, you might have 100 people applying or over 500 people applying. And they're going to be applying for maybe 8 slots, 12 slots, 18 slots. So it's like a 1 in 10 chance at each event. Now, when you get a rejection letter, it might not be that you don't have a great idea. It might be that you didn't fit into their theme, that particular event that they were doing. And so you need to apply to many different TEDx stages to find the stage that's right for you. But when you're applying, you also need to keep in mind that there might be someone applying about the same topic or the same type of thing. Like maybe a couple of you have some sort of a nonprofit and you're going to tell about that idea, not to make the nonprofit known, but how you came up with that particular idea. And so they may be different types of nonprofits, but they're going to look at that and say, okay, this is kind of a slot for business, nonprofit, something like that. Which of these has the stronger, more compelling idea, and which is the better speaker? Now, I will say that most TEDx stages in a true TEDx form are looking at the idea. So if you think you have to be a professional speaker to get on a TEDx stage, get that thought out of your head. Most TEDx stages like the idea over how good of a presenter you are, because they will bring in someone to help coach with the delivery. It's a little bit harder if you don't have a great idea. We can always help, and that's what I do now professionally, is I help people with their idea and develop it in a way that's helpful and that will rise above someone else in the same category. And so it's important to think about, what's my unique take on this particular topic? Like there's an opioid crisis. What is your particular idea that helps people save lives through the opioid crisis, for example? Does that help, Mary?
Oh, absolutely. That's fascinating to you got to know the numbers and do the research
Mm-hmm.
to it's not just, yeah, I have this great idea, but where does it fit in?
Yeah.
And the idea that you could apply to more than one stage. You don't have to stay to your local area,
Mm-hmm.
especially since so many things are being virtual. It's like the world is your
Absolutely.
stage.
Yes, the world is your stage right now. In fact, I was just listening to TEDx Gateway, which happens in India, just before this call. It ended about a half hour ago. And so I was listening to an economist who was on the stage right there. So I've also had the great privilege, and I would recommend any of you go to Eventbrite and just type in TEDx and start listening to TEDx events from anywhere around the world.
Oh, that's a great
Sometimes it
tip.
happens at a different time zone, but I still get up sometimes at 3 just because I want to hear this particular speaker or something. That's another thing, is it's not so much about the speaker in terms of their bio and so forth like that. It's that idea. Like, does the title create intrigue? And that idea, is it something compelling? Will you hook us in the beginning? So it's interesting because these are virtual. And if I were attending a live TEDx event, I would never walk out. But I have that freedom right now, if I need to say, oh, this isn't interesting to me, to just click off. But it
Hmm.
also opens up the fact that you can record yourself if you're accepted to certain TEDx stages that most are still virtual, and do that editing and get it better. Whereas on the TEDx Red Dot, that the TED stage is made so famous, you get one shot at that. Some editing can
Uh-huh.
be done. They're different experiences, so still don't let that keep you from getting on the stage right now, and look at the advantages. One, the advantage right now is just anybody interested in TEDx talks and not needing to go to an entire TEDx event or go there in person. You can do it through Zoom right now. Just get on Eventbrite. And if you're thinking of giving a TEDx talk, I always recommend that my speakers attend a live one, or in this case, at least attend a virtual. I like them to do one of each. So go out just as a participant or as a potential speaker to see what other people saying that are happening right now today.
Would you advise people to look for areas where, well, can you even find out what the percentage is of how many slots are available, and so to increase their odds? Is there anything they can do to increase their odds?
The idea is really what increases your odds,
Mm,
because they're going to make room for a fantastic idea. Absolutely. They're going to want you on their stage.
okay,
So
okay.
don't be boring. Don't be
Oh,
unclear. Don't be unclear. Make sure it's really clear, concise, and compelling. And that's something that I help people with.
okay, that's fabulous. So that's the advice for how to land, is to have this great idea and don't be boring. Be clear and concise,
Yes.
and you don't ha- you don't have to be this polished speaker, but you have to have passion,
Hmm.
right?
There are four things that most TEDx stages, their applications. Now, to back up, TED is the annual conference. It happens once a year in April, typically, except the last 2 years, in Vancouver, BC, even though it used to be in California. A TEDx event is TED gives a license to someone, maybe at a university or in a city, a group of people that want to get together and bring this TED experience. So they are TED Talks, but it's a TEDx event. and your talk is called TEDx Wherever You're At. And there's 4 things that when they're taking applications or when you're nominating someone else, because some let you nominate a speaker. So here's kind of the good gauge is think about Simon Sinek, if you've ever heard of him, that I mentioned in the very beginning. He wasn't even one of the ones asked, and he wasn't applying. Someone else was asked and said, oh, you need to hear his message. So they chose him instead of that person. And they did that over about 13 years ago now. And he has 58 million views, I think it is, during that time. Then, of course, that led to a TED Talk. But TEDx means independently organized, and everyone has a different style of an application each stage. Some do not take applications. They've been in it long enough, and they go out and research you, an expert, for the type of conference they want to put together, the thing that they have. But in general, you can go just Google TEDx in your area and then look at their application. But there's typically 4 things that they want to know. What's your idea? That's always number 1. Who are you? Why should we listen to you talk about this idea? Because there are many people that can talk about that, but why you? And then what is the audience going to take away? So if I go to an event and there are 12 speakers, I should have 12 new ideas to take home with me. It's much like going to the movies. And if you're still talking about that movie, then you know it was a great movie. If you've forgotten it the next day, it's not great. So you've got to do something that is sticky, that challenges the current way of looking at something, that is your unique vantage point on this particular topic that you're speaking on.
And call to action.
Yes, and have a call to action.
The impact you're having.
Yeah. So I teach a university class that also has a segment in it. So I've helped about 200 students do a TED style talk. I say that because they're TED Talks, but they aren't branded that way, and they're not marketed that way because there's really strict branding in TED. But it's learning how to do a TED style talk. And in that, we always talk about really making them stick out in some way to make it rise above, and something that's unique to you. We do the same thing there. I'll do the same thing. I need a drink of water too.
That's amazing. And how do you coach people to prepare not to cough?
Well, the interesting thing is when you are doing it live on stage, if that were to happen, it would happen. Of course, that just happens. However, these are saved and put on YouTube, as I've alluded to, and that's why people know about TEDx Talks now. And so there are usually 3 different camera angles on you. And so you'll see it switching to headshot or slides or full body or left or right. And then whoever's done the videos, they also edit it. So if there was a cough like that, then you can clip that out. I had a speaker one time who was on stage, and I had worked really closely with her, and people were into her talk, and suddenly she paused. And I was backstage, and other people backstage said, she's getting emotional. And I said, nope, she's forgotten where she's at in her script. And she had a full 58-second pause. So we clipped out 56 seconds of that for the YouTube.
For the YouTube.
Yeah. Well, TED also gives you the right to come back to your audience in a live event. Let's say that someone really did mess up maybe their introduction or conclusion. You could, at the end of your program, say, with your permission, we're going to ask Mary to come back on the stage, and she's going to do the first 3 minutes of her TED Talk again. That way, I've never had that happen personally, other than just editing little things out like that. But we do have that right to do it in organizing an event.
Well, that's nice to know that you have a little backup.
Yes, exactly.
It's one thing to lose your place and regroup, and it's another thing to physically. My throat's closing up.
That's right. Well, in a non-vulnerability, I'm thinking, why was I talking about the university? It's because in that class that I teach, so I was also forgetting why I went there, is Dr. Abella. He uses something called the Think Do Matrix. And so I have my university students, I say, what do you want your audience or what does your audience think about this topic now? And what do you want them to think about when you finish? Because we were talking about the takeaway, the call to action. And then the second thing is, what is your audience doing around in this particular topic right now? And what do you want them to be doing afterwards? I like to also add, what does your audience feel about it right now? And how do you want them to feel about it afterwards? So that's something that I add to it as well. So that helps you to know what your call to action is. That's a good gateway into figuring out, well, this is what I really want on it. What's my intention? What is that takeaway?
Right.
So the goal, at least when you're coaching with me, is to get it down to one sentence, maybe 10 words. And that's because the idea, something you could even say out of context, that people would have some help from it. The great speakers who have had so many hits, partly because they were early ones, like Simon Sinek and Brene Brown and Amy Cuddy and Dan Pink and so forth, have simple messages when it comes down to it. Brene Brown, there's power in vulnerability. We all see her as the vulnerability expert, right? And it's really hard to come and talk about vulnerability after someone like Brene Brown has. It's not impossible. For example, I have someone who is a body language expert, and Amy Cuddy is the body language expert. She has about 59 million views. Maybe hers is a little less than that. And this particular person, she did a talk on body language, and she has, I keep saying 1.6 million. I happened to check a couple of days ago, and she's not 1.7 million. And she did it back in 2015. So that's still 1.7 million views for her. It's not the 59 million or the 58 million that Amy Cuddy might have. But when you're watching Amy Cuddy, and this is YouTube, you know what happens? YouTube makes recommendations. So you'll get lots of body language recommendations. And hers is a great talk that you could go watch hers. Ann Washburn, go watch her TEDx talk on body language, because we know that we need to do something different. Now, Amy Cuddy, hers in her title says, your body language may change your life. And so I know immediately I should probably sit up in the chair and roll my shoulders back and maybe lift my head up a little bit and smile a little bit more and have my hands open, because it's going to make this experience today better. It's going to also make my life better if I'm more open in my speaking. So just something like that. And then Simon Sinek, he tells 3 stories. And at the end of each story, the story about Martin Luther King, Apple Computer, and the Wright brothers, how they all started with why, he'll tell the story and then he'll say, people don't care what you do. They care why you do it. And so that's his takeaway phrase. So you want something for them to take away in terms of a phrase or a story that's going to stay with them, or when you do this, you're going to get this type of a situation. So bring that down to 1 to 2 sentences. With me, it's about 10 words. And the 10 words really comes from Harvard case studies. Harvard Business School uses case studies, and everyone has to participate. And when I'm done, I get to choose. So I'll say Mary next. And then Mary, you get one comment during the whole class, and it has to be said in 10 words. Because it really makes you focus in on what is the thought that you have. And so my perspective is different than yours on the same topic. And then you give your perspective that's different than mine, each in 10 words or less.
That's beautiful. And it goes back to, that just like in writing, you have to know the core message that you're going to weave throughout everything that what you stand for.
Absolutely.
I talk about your story matters, and no one can tell your story from your perspective. And when you were talking about that, you also want to make people, you pay attention to how you want them to feel when they walk away from that talk, which is one of Maya Angelou's quotes as well. People might not remember what you said, but they will definitely remember how you made them feel.
Yeah. And just think about Simon Sinek and Maya Angelou have said basically the same thing, but they each said it differently, and they said it in a compelling way that we remember both. And it's really important. And speaking about, books, so like, is it The Art of War from, how do you say his name? Sun Tzu, is so popular. He has this really, he writes a whole book about one topic, and that is all of war is deception. And so that is a sentence that stands alone. And you can have the sentence stand alone. You can give a TED talk on it. You can do a 3-day workshop on it, or you can write a book on it. So it's always bring it down. So that's what we have in common, right? Speaking or books is it's one idea. One idea. And that's why TED Talks are different, is because keynotes are, here are my 3 points. Of course, a great keynote is going to have all 3 of those tied up to that one idea. But often it comes across as, I've got to tell you 3 things. And 3 is a
Mm,
magic number, of course, and that means doesn't mean you can't talk about it. But a TED Talk is a conversation, and usually you get talking with a friend and you zero in on one thing and you talk about that one thing, and that makes a great
mhm.
TED Talk.
Yeah, going deeper.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we talked about how to land, nail, and did we talk about how to use the TEDx talk?
We have not talked about how to use a TEDx Talk, and I think you have some examples out there in Simon Sinek and Amy Cuddy and Mel Robbins and Dan Pink and Brene Brown, because truthfully, those people, at least, I don't know if Mel had her book, but I know that Simon and Brene, that came later. Some people think, well, I've got a book launch, so I got to get on a TEDx stage, and that's okay. But think about it this way: is that it doesn't cost anything to give a TED Talk, and you don't get paid to give one either, but it doesn't cost your audience anything to watch your TED Talk. So it's a great way for them to get a feel, because we do business with people that we like and trust. So
Mhm.
that is an absolute free link that TED owns and that you can share and say, put on your website or share with people. So you want to use it afterwards. You want to have a really compelling talk, and then something that will have legs afterwards. I had a speaker who is the mother of someone with severe OCD, and she really got into her community, the OCD community, and let them know this talk was coming, shared her thoughts on it, asked for any feedback. And so they were excited that she was going to represent them on stage. And then, of course, when it came out, she went back to that community and they started sharing it. And her TEDx talk got bumped to TED.com. And so she has 2 different counters, the YouTube counter and the TED.com counter. So anybody who's on TED.com has both. It's on YouTube and the other. So those 2 together, she's at 750,000 views.
Is
And
there a
so
steam to be on TED.com?
there is a steam to be bumped up to that, because not everybody does get bumped up to that. You can still be found on just YouTube on TEDx, but it's like, so someone who I'd been coaching back in like January of 2020 and so forth. She got on, I think it was January this year. And I have an alert that comes on and TED recommends a talk, and hers got recommended. So that was like, oh
Mm.
my gosh, yes. Hers is on caregiving. And of course, caregiving, hers wasn't
Oh,
about the pandemic, but she did relate it to it. And here's another point that I
mhm.
didn't mention earlier about how you can get up on the stage is the pandemic has changed things for us. So is there something, now there's a little bit of pandemic fatigue, of course,
Ah,
but the whole point is they want you to talk about that topic and how it applies to today. So your research may have been something you've been doing for 10 years or something, but what is the greater conclusion that you've drawn about that research or from that experience or from these experiences, and how does it apply to us today?
right.
If you're talking about finances, how is that different today? If you're talking about happiness, how's that different today? If you're talking about OCD, how's that different today? Whatever your topic is, how does it
Mhm.
apply to today?
Right. The audience wants to know, "What's in it for me?" I'm gonna
Absolutely, that's what
invest
it's always
I'm
about.
gonna invest that time. You
Mhm.
know, what am I gonna learn? Why would I, and back to the why.
Yeah.
Why would I do this?
Why will I sit here for 10 minutes? So back to how you use it, you can then share it, and you can't get up and sell your business or your politics or your woo woo or anything like that, but you can certainly tell us about the idea and make it compelling enough that we want to say, oh, Mary Knippel, TEDx, boom, here comes the talk. And then I'm going to listen to it, and there'll be a description. And then you're going to, like, there was one that I was really impressed with what she said, because my family and I have been going through grief. Um, and she spoke about grief, and so I reached out to her. Even though she has millions of views, she was so kind. I had to do a little digging to find her. She was a professor, so it made
Oh,
it easier to find her, but she was very gracious in her comments back, and appreciated knowing that it had helped us.
right. You never know if you are compelled to make that extra step,
Mhm.
that what kind of response you're gonna get, what you're
Exactly.
gonna open yourself up to. The opportunity is there when you say yes.
Yes, there is the ability for impact. So if other people have gotten TEDx speakers have gotten back to me about their experience, say that I was chosen over someone else simply because I had TEDx there. So again, if you're weighing between two people, if you've got that credibility of that big stage, there may be more of a nod to take you there. Or if someone is doing business with you, there's that little bit more of a nod of credibility if you've been on the TEDx stage. I had one who, she said to me, I got a job through this, and it wasn't even about what I was speaking about, but someone had seen it, and then they recommended me to someone, and he came and watched it so he could get a feel of my personality, and I became his vice president through that. So it's pretty incredible, the things that can happen, not just in impact and helping someone like, oh my gosh, you understand what I'm going through, and this helps me know how to deal with it, but also possibly coming to you and wanting to have you help me with whatever, with how you serve people.
So it underscores the know, like, and trust factor,
Mm-hmm.
that we all want to have an affinity and know that we're making good choices for ourselves because we did due diligence, just not just that, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is really popular right now, so I'm going to lean that way. It's, is this right for me?
And I would say if you have a message inside of you, you do have an idea, then explore that. And especially if you feel like you've got an idea or a book in you, it's kind of the same thing. I had a TEDx speaker who got on the stage March 2020, and just 3 days later, we wouldn't have been able to have that event live. Things shut down. And I'm so happy that she did get that opportunity because she passed away this year. And so she had that on her bucket list. The interesting thing is she spoke about dying. Her title of her talk was I Love Dying, because 30 years earlier she had died and then had come back, and she talks about that experience, and she was very compelled to share that experience. And wow, just the serendipity,
the legacy.
Yeah, the legacy of having that out there. I don't know that she was writing a book. I don't know if she was going to follow up with her daughter to find out if she got her book done, but don't wait. Don't wait until you're 60 to do it. If you are 60, make sure you make it a priority now. But even now, and I hope they know that anybody can give a talk. There are great 12-year-olds that have given fabulous TED Talks. There are teenagers that have given it. There are young adults. There's such compelling speakers. There's even a program called TED Fellows that those TED Fellows also end up speaking at TED.com. And at any age, there was a woman I watched yesterday who's 85, and she is a skydiver and has been skydiving since she was 58. Like, oh my goodness, it's so fun.
That gives me goosebumps. That's not something I do.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll end with this, that years ago, I saw Joe Smith, and I don't know how old he is, but he gave his TED Talk probably about 12 years ago or a decade ago. And you know that an idea sticks when this happens. So Joe Smith, it's a 3.5-minute talk. He has 2 pans of water, one's soapy water, one's clear water. And he washes his hands and he rinses them. And then he says to one side of the audience, say shake. And so they all say shake. And he shakes his hands 12 times. And then to this side of the audience, he says fold. And he takes a paper towel from the public restroom, folds it in half, and then wipes his hands. And he said, if you will shake your hands 12 times and fold that paper towel in half, you'll never have to use 2 paper towels. Now, you know it's sticky when you are in an airport and you see a person shaking their hands and folding the towel, and you go, Joe Smith, and they said, you got it.
Oh, that's impact. And that's a takeaway, that a call to action, and they're doing it.
Yes, they're doing it.
Oh, so how can people get in touch with you? And do you have anything that we can offer our listeners?
Yes, I think you'll put it in the link for them. But
it will be in the notes.
Yeah, the notes. So if you go to ML Speaks, so on mine you see Maija Lisa Speaks. That's kind of a long name, Maija Lisa. So my website is mlspeaks.com. And on the front page, you can download the top 10 tips that a speaker coach is looking for in a TEDx speaker. And
wonderful.
Yeah, and that will help you. And then also, if you scroll down to the next page, for some of the first few, like the first 6 that watch this, I'd be happy to open up my calendar for you to actually have a 30-minute consultation about your specific path to the TEDx stage. And I would love to have them take advantage of that as well.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah,
So anybody that's thinking about, should I do a TEDx talk?
yeah.
Take advantage of talking to the expert who
Mhm.
can guide you and give you feedback about, is this the great idea that is
Yeah.
going to get you on the TEDx stage?
Mhm. And I hope you'll think of it seriously, but also if you know of someone, just like someone recommended Simon Sinek, is there someone who you think really should do a TEDx talk? You're welcome to pass that link on to them as well, my website.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been wonderful, wonderful information and so inspiring to know that you don't have to be this polished speaker to
Right.
go out there and expound to the audience that you need the great idea
You
and
can make a
you need
difference in three
to
and a half
make a
minutes
difference
on stage.
in three and a half minutes. That's the caveat too.
That's
It's
right.
like you have to be concise and compelling in three and a half
That's
minutes.
right. Yes, you do.
Okay.
Thanks, Mary.
Oh,
Appreciate
thank
the time
you.
and
Thank
inviting me
you.
here. Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's Maija-Liisa Adams and Mary Knippel signing off from Book Notes, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.